In this video, we're diving into everything that you need to know about the client portal. We'll go over how to access and preview the portal to see what your client sees, when and how to invite clients, different ways to share information from documents and quote letters to change orders and daily logs, plus a few handy tips on messaging clients and tracking their responses. By the end, you'll have a full understanding of how to make the most out of the client portal to keep your clients informed and your communication streamlined. Jumping into my BuildExact account now, and point number 1, how to open the client portal. Now, this part's a little bit of a trick question because technically you don't open the client portal. As soon as a lead exists, a portal is automatically created behind the scenes. It just sits there quietly until you either share something with the client or invite them to view it, whichever happens first. Until then, it's waiting for its moment to shine. Just remember, you must have a lead to use the client portal. To give a bit of context, when someone shows interest in doing a project with you, you can either start in the leads section or jump straight into creating an estimate. Leads are where you capture all those early details about the client, their contact info, what kind of project they're interested in, any notes about your conversations, and where things currently stand. From there, a lead typically progresses into an estimate, and once the client accepts that estimate, it becomes a job. You can actually see that flow visually in your navigation panel. Leads, estimates, jobs, showing how everything connects together. Some users skip leads entirely and start with estimates, and that's completely fine. And if you're not sure which flow works best for you, I'd suggest watching our other tutorial on leads that goes into more detail. But I'll go ahead and click into one of my leads, and in the Lead Details tab, you enter general info about the project, and if you scroll down, this is the first place you'll see the client portal mentioned. And here you have two options: invite your client to the portal and preview the client portal so you can see what the client would see. You'll see these same options later when you create an estimate, and that's actually where most users first invite their clients to have access, but whatever works best for your workflow. And on that note, like I mentioned earlier, some users choose not to track their leads and just go straight into creating estimates, and that's completely fine. If you've created an estimate without a lead and now want to use the client portal, you can still do that. You just need to create a lead and link it to that estimate afterward. It only takes a couple of quick steps, which I'll show you next. Looking at an example, if we open an estimate that did start in leads, you'll notice in the top left corner there's a reference to the lead, along with a unique reference number. But if I open an estimate that didn't start in leads, you'll see it says unassigned. So let's say I want to use the client portal for this estimate. I'll stay on this Estimate Details tab and scroll down to the section called Lead Details. This section shows which lead the estimate is tied to. Since this one isn't linked to one, I see an option to Link to Lead. And linking an estimate to a lead is that key that unlocks access to the client portal. When I click Link to Lead, BuildExact will automatically search through my list of leads to see if there's anything connected to this client's name. From there, I can either link it to an existing lead or choose Add a Lead to create a new one. The biggest takeaway here is that if you didn't start in leads, that's okay. You can still give your client access to the client portal by linking your estimate to a lead later. The only situation we can't fix is when you've skipped the estimate entirely and just created a job on its own. The client portal connection relies on that estimate to lead link, so there has to be an estimate in the middle for everything to work properly. Once I've linked a lead to this estimate, I again have the same options I had previously to either invite my client or preview the client portal. Now that we've covered that scenario, I'm going to head back over to the lead we were in earlier. And we're back in that option to either invite or preview. I'm going to click preview, and this will let us see what the client would see in their portal. And you can preview the client portal at any time. So if you like to check it out from time to time, no problem. And when you do this for the first time, it's going to want you to create a login. And you can use the same credentials you use for your BuildExact login, but the client portal is kind of like a sister site to BuildExact. They're not one and the same, but related, and they talk to each other. Once you do that, the login screen you see here is the same you and the client would see. And I'll go ahead and log in. And the first page you'll land on will give you an overview of all the client portals you've created, and you can click into them from there. So what that means is you can go between them rather than having to go back to the lead or the estimate and hit the preview on each single one. You can just bounce around and preview any of the client portals you've created once you've logged in. And a related point is if you do repeat work for the same client, the client gets a similar view of this. They'll see all the projects where you and them have worked together with a client portal, and they can actually flick between projects in the same kind of way. While we're in this preview mode, I'll give you a tour. From here, you'll see your projects list. Same idea here, where you can pop into different portals to view them, and same if your client has multiple projects you're doing with them. And the main sections that are relevant to the client really start with timeline. This is where you get rolling updates. Like I have some job site progress pictures here, but it could really be anything. These updates come from a few different places, and as we get into sharing documents, I'll point out where and how you do that. Next, messages. Clients can message you and you can message them. Each conversation works like a thread, very similar to a text message. Once a message is open, you can go back and forth on the same topic or create a new message on a different topic. If we go back to the timeline for a second, you'll notice the client sees a lot of these new message buttons throughout the portal. For example, if they click one in relation to a timeline message, it creates a new message linked to that shared item. We do this intentionally, for instance, with quotes. The client can start a new message linked to a specific quote. That way you know they're asking about the quote, even if they don't explicitly say it. Quotes in the portal look similar to how they would if you emailed them. Clients can review, download, and message you about the quote. And if you use the digital signature option on quotes or even change orders, the signature can be completed right here in the portal, just like an emailed document. And here you can see the client has signed our quote and accepted already, but had they not, they'd be prompted for a signature here. Next, selections. This section has its own video as there's a lot to cover on how it works and how clients make their selections, so I'll be brief here, but if you're interested in using selections, check out that separate video. But simply put, you can share items into the client portal. The client can select or deselect items and get a sense of when things need to be decided on. A special note when previewing the portal. In this example, I've set it up as if I'm the client, so I have full access and can make changes. When you are previewing, you cannot select items in the portal. That's the client's role. If you want to select on their behalf, you can do that from the selection area. Again, something we cover in our selections video. Similarly, you cannot create messages from here while you are previewing the client's portal. Messages must be sent from the main BuildExact area. Otherwise, you'd essentially be messaging yourself. The last few sections, plans, documents, are mostly self-explanatory. For example, change orders come directly from the change order section, and you'll see this more clearly when we actually share items, but definitely preview the portal to see what the client sees and get a sense of it all. On another point, there's also a contacts tab, which shows your contact details, and there's also a portfolio area. And if you're curious where these photos come from, back in BuildExact, these images are set up in the My Business tab under the Gallery section. This is what displays to the client if you use the portfolio area, and you can always delete old photos or add new ones at any time. Now let's talk about inviting the client. When I click Invite, BuildExact generates the invitation message, ready to send. You can add individuals to the invitation, but by default, it includes the main contact on the account. But you might want to invite multiple people, like a husband and wife who both want separate access, or even a family member or parent-in-law who's helped funding the project and wants visibility. One important note of caution: once someone has access to the client portal, you can't remove them. We'll touch more on this when we talk about sharing documents, but the portal is treated like a permanent project record. Once something is shared there, it stays there. This setup ensures that if there's ever a dispute or you need to look back at past communication or documents, nothing can be deleted or altered, and access can't be revoked. So it's best to only invite people who will be involved throughout the entire project. If you ever find yourself in a tricky situation with portal access, let us know and we can walk you through a few possible solutions. From here, you can choose to invite any of the listed contacts, and if you invite somebody who's already been invited, it'll simply just send them a reminder. That's helpful when a client says something like they lost the invite or it ended up in their junk folder. Just click Invite again, select their name, and resend the invitation. When they receive the message, it'll prompt them to open the portal and set up a login, the same way you would when previewing it yourself. And that will give them full access to their client portal. Once they've done that, you'll see the status of the invite change to accepted. All right, now from here, let's move on to sharing content, and I'll start with the messages. Communications is essentially the messages area. I'll flip back and forth a bit here to show you both the build exec side and the client side. With communications, you can start new messages, view open conversations, and see alerts for new messages. If you look over to the left, you'll see we have a Communications tab on our main navigation panel. And if I click into that, you'll have the option to view conversations. These are all related to your client portal messages. So not client-specific, but all the messages from your client portals. This Conversations tab is where you'll receive notifications for any new messages or activity from clients in general. You can respond to messages from here, but, and this is just personal preference, when I see a new message alert, I like to go back into the lead and handle the communications from there. That way, I'm focused only on that specific client's portal. But you can absolutely create and manage all your conversations directly through the Communications tab if you prefer. Now let's talk about sharing. There are actually several ways to share content into the client portal. You can share from any documents area throughout the life cycle of the project, either from the Lead Details tab, or once you've created an estimate for the client, the Estimate Details tab. And if that estimate turns into a job, from the Job Details tab. I'll go ahead and add a document, and when I pull in a document, it first wants us to place it in an existing folder or create a new folder. A quick side note, the folder names you use in your documents are visible to the client for anything you share. So it's a good idea to stay organized and be mindful of how you name your folders. And of course, not everything has to be shared. You can absolutely have documents that stay private and never appear in the client portal. But once you do share something, it's there permanently, just like we mentioned earlier. Now, once that's uploaded, it's just sitting in our documents and only visible to us. But if I select that document using the checkbox, that's where I have the option to then share to the client portal. When you go through the sharing process, you'll be asked to choose where to place the item in the portal. The options you see will vary depending on where you're sharing from. For example, if you're sharing from documents, Build Exec doesn't know what type of file it is, so you can choose anywhere in the portal. But say if you were sharing from the change orders section of the platform, it will automatically restrict your options to that section. And if you want something to appear in the timeline, you can do that too. Just click the checkbox to Include in Timeline and add a short description. And as you noticed, there's a little bit of friction before you share something to the client portal. And that's intentional. It's there to make sure you're fully aware of what you're sharing and to avoid any confusion that items are automatically sent to the client portal. I know I've mentioned this already, but it's worth repeating. Anything you share stays there permanently. You can send revisions, but neither you nor the client can delete documents. This is to keep things fair and transparent for everyone. All right, moving on to the other areas where you can share from. If we jump into one of our estimates, you'll notice share buttons in several areas. For example, in plans and takeoffs, also in the quote letter next to the send quote button. And once that estimate is turned into a job, you'll also notice them in the change order section and the invoicing section. The schedule can also be shared with clients by generating it as a document. You can create the version you'd like to show, detailed or condensed, with the date range you prefer, then download it and upload it into the documents area of your job or estimate details. And from there, you can easily share it through the portal. So let's look at an example using the change order screen. When you click Share, under the Recipient section, you'll see a few options. If a client portal exists, it'll ask, do you want to share this to the portal? If you select No, half the page disappears, and that's all the sharing-related options. But if you choose Yes, BuildExec lists everyone who's been invited to that portal. This helps prevent a common issue where someone shares something, asks the client about it later, and the clients say they never saw it because they hadn't been invited yet. This section makes it clear who actually has access. Finally, let's talk about the daily logs. We're giving it its own section because it works a bit differently. The daily logs combines updates from a couple of different areas, entries made from the desktop version or from members using the on-site app. Generally, most treat the daily logs as about 90% internal notes and maybe around 10% client-facing updates. As we mentioned earlier, when you share something from your daily logs to the client portal, it appears in the timeline section. And before it's shared, you'll see a few options that let you control exactly what information gets shared. There's no direct link between the on-site app and the client portal, and that separation is intentional. It gives you a chance to review and edit what gets shared before the client sees it. So if a daily log was shared from a crew member using the on-site app, and maybe you want to modify the notes they left for more client-facing appropriate verbiage, you can. And if the post contained multiple pictures, you could delete whichever ones you don't want client-facing in the portal. But that original post with all the pictures will still be referenced here in the on-site app for you and your crew. We do have separate videos on the on-site app, so if you're curious about that in more detail, give that a watch. And sometimes people notice a post seems to duplicate after sharing. That's because BuildExec keeps both versions, the original post and the shared version. In most cases, they'll look identical, but this helps you tell which version was sent to the client. You can also filter or search within the daily logs to show only shared items, only originals, or both, whatever works best for you. And in short, this is a great way to keep clients up to date and maintain a clear record of communication throughout the project. And that wraps up our walkthrough on the client portal. As always, if you have any questions, please let us know.